Good evening. How y'all doing this evening? I want to thank y'all for coming out for our second round of town halls. We did them kind of at the end of the year last year to make sure we hit all the communities, and now we're coming through, and what you're going to see going forward is that we're going to be in Chauvin either January, February, and every year you'll see that, right? So you kind of know people plan for it ahead of time. And so I know with busy January, we pushed into February, but we're going to normalize that and make sure we get the word out so people could come ask questions and have conversations. So I want to thank y'all for being here. Let me make sure. Leilani, you got a list for me of what, who, what, when, where? No? Who, what, when, where? All the directors and all that. Ah, okay. Thank you. I had to look. All right. So we'll go ahead and I want to introduce, so we do, like always, we bring some people from our parish to chat and be involved in the process. Starting with the two guys you've been seeing set up, Russell and Ryan, our communications department. That's something that we added last year that we didn't have before. We got Clay Knockan with solid waste. We got Chief Travis Terrio with HPD. Raise his hand back there. We have Chief Corey Henry with Home and Fire Department. Right, Kelly Venardo with Housing Human Services. Leilani Adams, who I was asking about earlier, is my Chief of Staff. Mark Black with Coastal Restoration. Chris Pulaski with Planning and Zoning. We have Noah Leeret sitting next to him as our Chief Administrative Officer. We have Mr. Ryan Page, who's HR Risk Management. And Earl Hughes made it here. Thank you, Earl, for coming. He is Office of Emergency Preparedness, especially when we have the event like we just had. That's the guy that really runs everything. We're also thankful to have Senator Mike Fazy join us, Councilwoman Kim Chauvin over there, and State Rep Jessica Domain. So they're here to have a conversation and participate with us. So like I always do, for those who maybe seen it before, I always like to start by asking one question. We could go through a presentation that I have that we've updated since the last time we've been here, or we could jump straight into answering questions. And I'm good either way, because I'm not going to leave here till every question is answered, and or if we get your information and have to get you an answer, we're going to make sure we have all that information to really make sure we get you the information we need. You know, we took the papers that we collected last time and gave that to our directors and said, hey, we need to get these issues resolved. And so most, if not all, those issues should have been resolved, and the ones that are not usually are related to funding of some level, shape, or form. But I'm good either way. So I tell you what, show of hands, y'all want to go through the presentation and then go through questions and answers? Does that sound good? Yeah? Yeah, good. Okay, we're going to do that. So last time we came here, it was recovery, resiliency, and quality of life. And really it's transitioned into what we call recovery, resiliency, and revitalization. That was actually a recommendation of my Chief Administrative Officer, and I said, you know what, that's a great idea. We're going to make that change. So we're going to jump into that and talk about kind of what's going on rebuilding. Again, still post-Ida, right? 3.5, 4 years later. We're still navigating that. We're still working on getting obligations of money from the federal government to make sure we get some projects started and or finished. And so some of the ones that we talked about even last year, we're still working on, which is the Air Base Fire Station. That FEMA funding is obligated, final design anticipated to be approved in March of 25, to which we go construction. And I just like sharing this information because just like I know people are still dealing with recovery with their homes and their properties, we're going through this at the parish level also. Our Civic Center, which had the temporary roof blown off of it for Francine along with our power plant, is anticipated completion of May of 25. That was pushed back from January due to Francine. The Dumas Auditorium, we completed that in 2024. The Municipal Auditorium, if you hadn't been in there, man, that place looks good. The lights are bright, beautiful new ceilings. Main outmelon sort of project completed, and we got some other smaller projects finishing in 2025. And the Buquet Bridge, the bid has been awarded. It's a 2-year project. We're expected to be finished in 2026. They're pretty much changing everything but the frame, and that by doing that actually saves 6 months of the project. And so, again, 3.5, 4 years after the storm, we're just getting some funding. And, you know, I like to tell people, when you look at FEMA doesn't get involved in the insurance is finished. And so we had to sue our insurance company, win that lawsuit. And once they said, okay, we've identified, you know, you guys had $65 million worth of coverage. We're going to give you $65 million with your insurance. You know, it's too expensive to buy insurance for everything that we own, right? We're looking at we were at 300 million worth of property. We were able to reduce that to 200 million with different things like the power plant not functioning right now. But we had to navigate that with FEMA like everybody else, that they wouldn't get involved until we did everything with our insurance. And from there, if we spend $1 on anything before they award us, they won't reimburse us, right? Because all of this is reimbursed at either like anywhere from a 90-10 to a 75-25. And some other projects I'll talk about, another funding I'm gonna talk about, it's the same concept. We gotta spend the money and then they reimburse us. And if you don't meet the rules and everything they say you gotta do, they don't reimburse us. So these are the things that we're still working on post-IDA. And so I didn't say this earlier, so this is open conversation. If you got any questions at any time, at the end of each slide, I'm gonna pause to see if there's any questions, and then we'll go through and just continue to talk through it. So any questions on this related to post-IDA? All right. So the power plant, you may wonder why I talk about the power plant when in some situations, particularly here, you're not on Terrebonne Parish power. And I do that because there are two main facilities that operate in the area that power plant services. They are the hospital and the water plant. So it's important to us that we make sure that we are producing water, and that our hospitals are open, right? Not only Terrebonne General, but Chauvin, and we have some airport services that all operate off of that power plant. We were obligated $65 million. They're saying it's a $170 million project, of which we're gonna have to put whatever deductible we have on our insurance. That funds that we got awarded in that lawsuit is gonna go towards that project, but we're still waiting on FEMA to obligate the other $105 million. That's a conversation I had a couple weeks ago, just talking with our representatives and our congressmen and saying, they're like, what you need? I said, I need $105 million for a power plant so we can start that project, which is gonna take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to get done. But the sooner we start that project, the sooner that we're able to maintain. So we're in a 200 megawatt pocket of energy from Morgan City to New Orleans, of which we covered 80 megawatts of that with our power plant. We have one feeder line that comes in through energy, and if we lose that line, the power plant can sustain that 8 megawatts. Well, but right now we have temporary generators because FEMA identified a need related to our hospitals, airport, and water plant, that we have 20 megawatts of temporary generators. That's the 18-wheelers sitting outside the power plant. And if a situation happens where we lose power, that feeder from energy, we have 20 megawatts to run the hospitals and the water plant and the airport. And so with that, they're paying for it. There's nothing that comes out of our pockets to do it. But with the energy, it all is produced and put into a system of which energy is bought. So with that power plant not running and the generators there, if there ever becomes a load that's more than what the area can handle, those generators are called upon. And you can see in 2025, they've been called upon almost 69 hours. In 2024, they were called upon 7,521 hours compared to 2023, which was 1,315.63 hours. So without having those temporary generators, we possibly have rolling blackouts and brownouts. And so when they feel the load on a hot day or maybe a cold day, if there is a load, again, in that 200 megawatt pocket, these generators are called upon to make sure that we sustain that load. We were working on 847 repairs to the system-wide line of the 14,000 customers inside the Terrebonne Parish power setup system. And that was anticipated. It's anticipated to be completed in March of 25. But we ended up with a bunch of damages related to Francine, and we had to go back and figure out the delta between those two. And that's, if you go to my next slide, talks about we had 699 repairs that needed to happen. 194 of that has been completed, and that's anticipated to be completed in February, and then we have everything related to Francine. So when you hear about power issues related to the network that is Homa Power, we're still going through repairs from IDA to make sure that system's sustainable. And look, Energy, Sleeka, they're all going through that same thing. And as we continue to work through this. And that stuff we couldn't start again until we got the funding from FEMA to after we sued. But I think it's important to know what the role the power plant plays in the parish. That's a tongue twister there. As it relates to what it means to our entire community. And that's why we're working to rebuild the power plant to sustain the major resources that we have. Any questions on the power plant or electrical line stuff? All right, we'll bump into the next slide. So as it relates to IDA recovery, 3.5, 4 years after, we're just getting funding for Ida recovery, right? This is CDBG-DR, and as this, they allocated $117.6 million to us. They had a deadline for us for November 30th. We got everything turned in, plus a few extensions with information we needed, and now we're going back and forth. These are the projects that have already been approved. So you could see aviation program at Fletcher. You could see a Geraldine, a couple of pump stations, activate the bayou, which is going to be a couple different phases, a stormwater and wastewater plan, parish weather stations. One of the things we keep hearing from our residents is that when I deal with insurance, they want to know what sustained winds were, and businesses are talking about they want to know what sustained winds were, but we don't have gauges anywhere to tell us that. We're going to have that information to know what sustained winds were around the parish when it comes to having to work with the insurance companies to get things awarded. Main Street Complete Streets, implementation of one of the wastewater studies with Village East, and to support the seafood industry phase 2, which was a study that they awarded us before they did phase 1. So some of these projects are going to be, we're going to do a plan to understand, for example, in a sewage perspective, in some of the rural areas, this neighborhood, this street, these houses might not have sewage as far as city sewage or parish sewage. From there, what would it cost to make sure the system can support it? We have a north and a south plant, right? So depending on where you are, and then what it would be to add sewage to that neighborhood. So it might be $10 million to add a neighborhood and $1 million at the plant to take in that additional $10 million worth of sewage. That's what these plans are going to give us. And we've been added to, an example, one of the things is called the Delta Region Authority. For whatever reason, Lafayette and Terrebonne Parish are the only two parishes not in the Delta Region Authority. And it actually took an act of Congress to get us added into it. And now that we're into it, we have the opportunity of funding when it comes to water and sewage that we didn't have before. These studies are going to allow us not only from a wastewater but also stormwater to get us these projects. This is what the projects are. This is what they cost. Go through, prioritize those projects, and just start knocking those projects out 1, 2, 3, 4. So everything I talked about here in that funding, again, we have to spend and then get reimbursed. So we have 26 projects total. We've gone through, I think there's 6 right now that we submitted. They asked us questions, and then we send them back into them. And as we see right now, it looks like everything should be funded, but we don't know that for sure till everything's approved. And on some of these projects, like the aviation program, the downtown Terrebonne steam engine, we got to go through environmental. We got to make sure the soil's right and everything. Those processes take about 60 to 90 days. And so we're going through some of these on these projects now, that once we get past that, we'll better take that next step and start some projects. But when you look at things like support the seafood industry, identifying the different tiers, like somebody that maybe has a vessel, somebody that has a dock, somebody that's a processor, all what assistance they might need at the different levels. We have a small business grant that we applied for that we're gonna create an application process to get businesses to get funding. Again, it's related to IDA, but 3.5, 4 years after IDA to help make sure businesses in Terrebonne parishes have what they need to sustain maybe the next event like that. Downtown Terrebonne steam engine, that's something I'm real proud of because we're basically taking STEAM is STEM plus arts. That's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics plus arts. And it's an opportunity to teach young children, young adults, and adult skills that can be utilized in the fisheries industry or the oil and gas industry. And in turn, maybe even create another industry like robotics. We have all those opportunities because you look at everything that's going on with oil and gas, a lot of stuff's becoming automated, right? Autonomous vessels, robotic pipe handling equipment. And it's not something that, you look at, well, does that take jobs? Well, right now we have a shortage of people. So it then kind of helps kind of fill in, and it's a balance of that. And so by our community having those skills, we have the opportunity to end up creating a whole new industry that diversifies our economy. And that's why it's so important. Myself, I grew up in Trailenberg, had the right opportunity to deal with computers and then build computer businesses. I believe technology bridges gaps and tears down barriers. And I think we could take the current industries we have and improve those industries to then create new industry. Any questions on the CDBG-DR? Yes, ma'am.
When you're talking about the downtown Terrebonne steam engine, is that something that you could bring down to the library on this side of it? So that our kids, the kids in the library, we can get them up there and they can participate in it?
Yes, every project we do, and I don't care if it's CDBG-DR or anything else, I'm going to step on the side a little bit here. It's about having the hub of these programs somewhere, but then taking that out to the rest of the community, right? I think we'd be doing a disservice, no different than our business incubator and the small business grants. Again, some of those things might be housed in downtown area, but it's our responsibility to take these out. And this is where I have the community outreach conversation of going out into the communities and bringing resources. You look at the summer camps we've been doing for esports. We've been working to bring those to libraries and put $3,000 computers in kids' hands to, again, have an opportunity to touch and feel something they never did before. That's what we're going to do with the same thing. When I look at the small business grants, I feel like we do a disservice to businesses if we just said, here's some money, go get it. Well, I want South Central Planning and TITA involved where they get in, they identify their biggest pain as a business, and then help them use that funding to fix that pain. To me, that's how we help businesses succeed and do more with what they have by helping them, by guiding them through that process and doing that throughout Terrebonne Parish. So, guaranteed, I promise. All right, any other questions on this? All right, yes, sir. So similar to the wastewater plan, it's looking at, we have, anywhere, I think 4 or 5 different basins. You got the 11A, 11B, you got Chakahula. So all that water, everything water we deal with most of the time is coming from the north with rain or pushing from the south with tide, right? So it's looking at whether or not we need to make the area like intercoastal from all the way down to, there's a pump station at the end of Montague. Should we make that forced drainage, right? Right now it's gravity drainage. Should we make that forced drainage? Should we make this bayou forced drainage or gravity drainage? And we have, if we close the gate in Upper Little Caillou, this becomes a forced drainage system, right? But we have to close that gate. Well, if we put a gate up at the intercoastal, do we still need that gate? And again, what systems we can create, that's what those studies are gonna really lay out for us. And again, some of this stuff we're already having conversations for, but it's just really making sure that we're putting the funding where it needs to go and then letting everybody know, look, this is gravity, this is forced based on what we're looking at. And we're doing some things now to look at, a study 20 years ago might tell us we do or don't need this. Well, we just got to go back and update some of those studies because every time like Ida hit, that changed the topology of everything, right? The hydrology of all that changed, right? You got some land where you didn't, vice versa. So as we settle, right? I think that's an issue we're dealing with also. It's just we're all settling right now. As the land settles, that changes heights of things. And so to come back and do this, one of the other studies we're going to do, I think we hadn't done this since 2002, is a road and bridge study, right? It's just, again, evaluating it, going through and identifying where the major pain points are, where the priority spots are, and getting funding or applying funding to those areas to get that resolved and make sure we're spending that money like we need to, right? All right, any other questions? Yes, sir. So we had a housing use service building after Ida. It got destroyed, so they've been renting the space. So we're going to buy that space, and the building behind it, we're going to have the opportunity to do some sheltering out of right there, where they're right next to it. Because for the cold storm we just had here, originally we set up the warming center at West Homa Gym. And real quick, we're having a conversation, and again, the municipal was booked, or Dumas was booked, and whatever it was, we said, let's go there. Well, we didn't have an opportunity for a generator, so we moved people. We said, we're going to put it over to municipal. We know we got a generator. We know it's on city power. And so with that, it's if we could start with that warming center there, next to the building that they have, that's just more efficient. And then if we need to open up warming centers in other areas, everything runs out of that one center versus having things in different places. And really, again, to the fact that building was destroyed for Ida. So, any other questions? Okay, go on to the next slide. Capital outlay. So when we look at CDBGR, hurricane recovery funding, we then look at where are some opportunities to do some projects. And this is where capital outlay comes into play, right? So this is tax dollars that are collected, go to the state. From there, we go to the state and say, hey, these are priority projects. These are things we know we need to get done, whether it's a bridge or drainage or roads or, just going through, and you can see all kind of different projects here. When you look at, about high extension, that's part of a north-south corridor conversation. And so working with the state and our representatives and the people that have the money and saying, these are projects we feel are important They have different levels this works through. So if we put a new project on, which will be kind of the ones at the end over here on the right, you're never going to get that funded the first year. So we work with our representatives and our senators and say, we actually meet and say, hey, these are the things that we feel are important. What do you think's important? And then we take that to the state and go have a conversation about getting funding for those things that are important. And so it's really working to make sure, and I'll give you a good example, that last one on the right, that tower, parking garage tower. I worked in that tower in around 2000 time frame when I worked for RPC, and the thing always shook. And I get elected, get in office, and it still shakes. Doesn't seem like it shakes any more than what it did. But my question was, when's the last time we had this thing inspected? And they're like, we don't know. So we did an inspection. We got a negative report. Let's double check that, get a second opinion. We'll come to find out, and I understand it's a non-pre-stressed concrete structure. They have a lifetime of about 50 years. And that building's 50 years old this year. So unfortunately, we're going to have to demo it. And we were told if a car hit a column, it could pancake. From that point forward, we hadn't been in it. But at the end of the day, we had equipment get damaged for Francine that would have normally been in a parking garage. So it does help us for situations like a hurricane where we can store equipment and vehicles. And even PHI used to have park vehicles in the parking garage so that they could get flying people right after the storms. So again, we just look at what the needs are. We look at all the projects we have funded or partially funded. And a good example is we put together a list of all potential projects. And we're looking at that list itself is probably about $450 million. Then we had projects that we got with our directors on and said, if you need a vehicle, if you need something that's a little lower end than some of these projects, what would you like to get? And that wish list was another $50 million, right? We operate on a $260 million budget. I say it at every town hall. I say it again. We do not have all the funds to do everything we need to do, which is why I've been working on being efficient and changing the way we operate in the government. And I joke around about the Doge that President Trump's doing. I've been doing that for a year now before it was cool, right? Because we've been wanting to make sure we could take the funds we have and do more with it. And so as we go through and understand, we have projects and things but some of this stuff's been worked on for 5 years now. And looking at what other funding can we get, not only at the state level, whatever we can get funded at the state level, go and have a conversation at the federal level. They're doing earmarks now. They hadn't done earmarks for a little while. That's all available as funding. And so we've been giving projects to our Congress people and working with them to try to get funding on projects. And so as we navigate through this, these are just some of the projects that we're looking at. You might end up where you get 4 or 5 funded. It all depends on any surplus the state does or doesn't have. And as they navigate through that and all the tax session they just went through, if that tax session doesn't happen, we probably get 0 funding this year, right? Because we're going to end up with a deficit. But now we're looking at the fact that what they've done at the legislative level provides a funding opportunity to get some of these projects that are partially funded, like the Industrial Boulevard Pump Station. We might have 50% of that funding. And it includes if we have to put a match and what level that match is. But we're working with the state to get funding for projects like these. Any questions on capital outlay? Yes, ma'am. You only get 2 questions. Is your second one, last one? No, I'm joking.
You know that don't work. Okay, just wondering if anything can be added to it, because I'm looking at the widening of Bayou-Side Drive. The danger that most drivers are in on Bayou-Side is a lot of the big dump trucks. And get it, it's a very fine balance that we have. We need the levees so the trucks are going back and forth. But it's coming at times where there's almost head-on collisions with these big dump trucks. They don't have enough road. I'm having a call in today from to get the shells on the side. The ruts that they're making in front of me, like if my Avalon would hit it, it would absolutely flip that car over. So I'm just wondering if that could be added, because we need the widening of Bayou-Side as they travel on down.
Yeah, and part of that comes to that road study, and I know that we did the math on that road, $3.2 million to bring it back to what it is, not much less widen it. We are looking at some infrastructure funding to get that done, and that's what we do, right? We might take some of these projects and put them up for multiple funding sources to try to figure out what sticks. Again, if what I look at with Bayou-Side Drive, especially as it relates to capital outlay, I put it on this year. It's not getting funded this year. I'm trying to find funding for that now, right? So if I put it up this year, it goes to priority 5. It's going to sit there in priority 5 this year and maybe do priority 1 next year. my goal was infrastructure funding. We can find that funding and get it done sooner rather than later. So, yeah. Oh no, we have a lot of conversations about Bayside Drive, and we definitely understand. And look, we're even having conversations with the levee district about, whenever there's a road, we got a road that's meant for 500 cars a day, and it has 2,500 due to trucks and projects. Where us and the levee district work together to make sure we have the funding to maintain that 500 cars a day, but if it bumps up to 2,500, us working with the levee district to make sure we're on the same page and that those roads are either maintained or restored to what they were before. And again, it is bad, and that's something we know is a priority. And striping is something, we'll talk about a little bit later. If we striped every parish road, not any other road, parish roads, you're looking at between $3.4 and $3.8 million. So what happens now, because we only have a budget of so big, right? We spend about $250,000 to $300,000 a year to stripe a road here and a road there, to pave a road here and a road there. And that's where we go look for the larger pockets of money that say, man, if I get it all done, because what happens is we start striping roads, by the time we get to the end of the list, it's time to start over again, right? And so, repeatedly, that's what we've done in the past. Now, we added $700,000-800,000 in the road budget and $700,000 to $800,000 in the vegetation budget. We also rewrote our vegetation contract to get more bang for our buck, and including some things like the vegetation contractor's got to use our work order system so we can better track what's going on with that, right? So those are the things that we're doing, trying to find different pockets of money, and we definitely see some opportunities with that. And again, make it, I'm not afraid to go to DOTD or whoever it is, federal government, and say, I got this issue on this road. We're declaring an emergency. We need to get it fixed. And sometimes we just might have to do that, right? I'm glad I answered your third question. Yes, sir. So I know what we've looked at is the highest traffic roads and those lines being done first. Again, my goal is to get us to redo Bayside Drive, because if I put a line on it, it's going to get broke up anyway. To redo Bayside Drive and hopefully get that done in this time period and get it striped at the same time. So it's just working to find that funding. And I know we're dealing with the same thing across the parish, and that's why I say to stripe all parish roads, we're looking at probably $3.8 million to get them all done. But we're definitely looking at which ones are priority and trying to get those done first, 100%. Yes, sir. Well, that's the battle, right? It's like,
do it again and again through many years.
Right, and so for that levy, they might be doing work for another 3 years. So we got to find that balance of how much do we keep striping it, keep repairing it. Oh yeah, it's going to be tore up for a while. And you look at asphalt versus concrete. Those are all the conversations that we're having, right? If I do it for concrete, what is that return on investment? If I do asphalt, what is that return on investment, right? We're even looking at a new process for dealing with asphalt roads. That's an overlay that is 50% the cost for 75% of the life, right? So I can do something. Bayside Drive is not an option for this, but some other roads that we might asphalt, there's this overlay process that we could do for less money, and it gives us pretty much just as much life, right? And it's going to vary by for traffic and everything. And so what we ask is you just keep reporting, right? Keep telling us where the issues are. Kim's letting us know what the issues are. And we're doing some things, and we did that at the end of this year. We put about $300,000 in the Bayside Drive to try to get some major issues patched until we could buy time. But again, we spent $3.2 million fixing the road today, and another year be in that same boat. And that's a balance of us working with the levee district to get that stuff straightened out, Yes, sir. Don't thank me, thank the state. DOTD did it. We didn't know they were doing it until after they were doing it, but they did it. And we meet with them quarterly. I'm going to talk about that also, too. Berg Bridge. Is that on the next slide? Hang on. Nope, not on the next slide. It is on the slide. I'm being told March 25. And this is the process. Look like the Bouquet Bridge I was talking about earlier. Oh, no. So what's interesting is, so we meet with DOT quarterly. And I tell you what, go ahead and just jump down to that slide. Find that slide I have. Yep, Berg Bridge. There you go. Okay. things have been written and contracts have been done, and I think there's an opportunity. We were talking about that earlier. Whenever I talked to Jeff Landry before the election, he said he wanted to blow up and rebuild DOTD. Well, he's done a study. He's having those meetings, having those conversations, and using us as a partner to talk about areas that maybe we can do some things and save money by doing it less, right? And do it faster. So we have a CEA with DOTD. From a grass perspective, we're trying to do same things on roads, same things with bridges, same thing with ditches, where if they can't get to it, we do. We had a pothole on Martin Luther King about this big, about this deep. 2 cars right back to back, busted their tire, called David and said, hey, call DOTD. If they're not there in 4 hours, go fill it. Now, if something happens, we're liable. But at the end of the day, I'd rather patch it and save somebody's life or stop some damage. I'll take that liability every time. So we meet quarterly with DOTD, and it's conversations around every project. And you look at the Butte Bridge, about it being a 2-year project. That's going to be finished 5 years after the storm. It's unacceptable. But they build a lot of these bridges one-offs. And so, for example, St. Francis Church lost its air conditioner. The replacement air conditioner was a 43-week lead time. And that's what you're dealing with. They're building some of these parts as they get to that part of the project. The issue they're dealing with now is electrical. And again, it's about getting parts, making parts, all completely unacceptable. But at the end of the day, they're telling us March of 25, cross our fingers, say a prayer, and then once that one's done, a year from now, we'll be talking about another bridge that's not built or working in the same amount of time. And look at the Robinson Bridge, right? That bridge right there, even with some delays, right? And then you talk about the Boudreaux Canal Bridge. They're acquiring land. They're going to build that bridge on the side, right? That's where you start having a conversation about, can we do it on the side? Can we do a bridge that doesn't open, right? Company now doesn't have a lot of boat traffic. But whenever we got a person sitting at the Butte Bridge, because the Coast Guard tells us we have to, and I was like, why can't we put a camera? And they said, well, having a person there stops some looting, stops some other issues. It's safer if we have somebody there.
We don't have a lot of boat traffic, but the shipboat still
right.
goes across the lake with their big booms, and also still needs to be.
Right. So that's where, again, we're having to work with the state and work with these different organizations like Coast Guard. When they say you got to do this and you got to do that, and trying to balance that between what's best for our residents, what's best for the parish, right? And so I'll just go through the rest of these. So there's a Chauvin Road Bridge by the Rifle Range, a roundabout at 3185 and Main Project Road, a Country Estates Bridge replacement. And some of these projects, a good example is a roundabout going in by the Civic Center. That roundabout is a DOTD project, but it runs through us. And we go through the process of bidding with them and everything, but it's based on a project they're going to deal with. And so some projects is complete DOTD, complete us, and then some mix of something in between that. And that's why, every time we have a conversation with DOTD, it's like, get the latest update. Because what's important to me is even if there's an update that people don't like, we still share it, right? I'd rather share it and it not be something you like than not tell you what's going on at all. And that's what we're hearing now. Somebody asked about East Main Street, and I was getting Noah to look it up on the let list. But that's supposed to be repaired in 2025. All that, from where to where?
So it's a 9-mile stretch starting at downtown Court, which is right there on the south side of the overpass. And that's anywhere between a $5 and $7 million job. Expected to let out in April.
April. So somebody was asking me about how bad it was by the waterworks. There's a project in April. It's going to let from there. How many miles down? 9? Right. So that's going to be a similar project to Dulac over there, right? So to let you guys know what's coming. And look, we're going some roads to get closed, people get mad, but unfortunately, with progress, we got some temporary inconveniences.
One more thing to note, looking at the letting list from this year compared to last year. Last year we had 80 projects let. This year we have 14 in Terrebonne Parish. So I think that's
all DOTD projects.
DOTD, hopefully.
All right, and the Dulac pontoon dry docking, we're planning to have that done in 2025 also. Time frame on Dulac, Noah? What's the time frame on Dulac, on the Dulac pontoon bridge when they do send it to the shipyard, dry dock it? But the time frame it's going to be out.
I guess it depends after the assessment. We'll go get that answer for you.
I'll get that answer.
I'll get that for you.
Dulac Bridge.
That's the Butte Bridge. Yeah, that's the one that's starting and should be done at some point mid. They're changing everything but the frame. And by doing that, they save 6 months on the project. And look, originally we wanted to do the whole thing. And we were like, here's a different way to do this. And you know, it's interesting. We looked at a temporary bridge. Can we put a temporary bridge? They said just as long to build a temporary bridge as it would be to repair the one you have. And so we're asking those questions. And look, when I look at the Boudreaux Canal Bridge, right, we have a concern that what happens if that bridge goes out while the bridge is being built? We said, look, we might have to close marine traffic, but put a fixed bridge there, right? And DOTD's like, man, that's, you know, 3 million, 4 million. You know, we don't know. And again, we're having conversations with everybody at every level of DOTD going, we need a bridge if that bridge goes out. Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted to detail and let people know, we're not letting the Boudreaux Canal go without a fight if something does happen. NOAA has sent an email to Coast Guard because he had a guy that he knows again, so we were looking to see what the rules would be. I've talked to Jason multiple times about this bridge. I've talked to Jessica and I think Senator Mike Facey about it, and that we have to have a plan B in case it goes out, because I realize that the businesses in Chauvin cannot take another hit as we lost Robinson Canal from that way it was connected. So there are things that are in the working to try and figure out what can be done, but we don't even know when they're acquiring the land at this point. So I've sent to them, I think the regional director, and asking those things, and I think Jessica's done a few emails to them also and requested information. And so as I get that information, we'll go ahead and you know, kind of relay what we find out. But first we got to find when they're acquiring the land. That's the first go around of it, while we're trying to check with the Coast Guard to see what can be done, what they're going to allow to be done, because it's a matter.
Yeah, because if Coast Guard says you can't close that waterway, then now you put in a temporary bridge that moves, right? And for us to know that right now going into it, DOTD is saying it's probably not going to be a temporary bridge, I'd rather know that now and work to change that conversation and talk to the right people, and all our representatives talk to all the right people that says, you know, this is the impact economically it had the last time this happened. We can't let that happen, right? So, any questions on road and bridges? Noah's got something else?
We're going to do that pontoon. Once that work starts, we'll be working around shrimp season and picking a good day, but once it starts, it'll be out for about 6 weeks.
6 weeks. There you go. All right. Let's go back to where we were. Yes, sir. Go back. Is that where we were? Okay, yeah. So capital outlay projects, we talked about that. Housing crisis. So for those who may or may not know, we have an 800 unit housing shortage post-Ida. A lot of that is related to the Bayou Towers, which is about 350. Senator Circle is another 225. And then just various housing issues. And look, we had 17 residents lost their home for Francine. They experienced their Ida for Francine, right? I think we had 1,700 properties damaged, but 17 were demolished. And so we have, you know, working with both the Housing Authority and HUD to assess them with their plan, try to figure out who's supposed to come back, who came back, who's not coming back. And even if it's starting with, we're going to build 25 units to get a plan and start somewhere. When we met with HUD, they talked about how Katrina took 10 years, Harvey and Houston took 7. I was like, so are we shooting for 5? Can we have 5 maybe, you know, because we're already 3, 3.5, 4. But really just trying to make sure we do that. But what we've been done, and I got to give it to Kelly, who does an amazing job. We have Parkwood Place, which is 90 units, which is supposed to begin construction in 2025, January. Actually, I think we're a little delayed on that. We have West Tunnel Lofts, which is over there by South Louisiana Bank, which is 40 rental units. Construction is supposed to begin in that. Here shooting, I saw they were doing some work back there. But that was one that an article came out that we were loaning $1 million. So what we do, you know, when we get, with government, we get funding, and we can't use that funding for housing on roads, or we can't use roads on housing and vice versa. So with us being involved in getting housing built for our residents, we do a project, we take the funds from that project and turn around and put it into another project. That's a good example of that, is 40 units. Imperial Terrace is another 120 units, construction in May of 25. Bon Terre, 55 units, which is downtown, pending funding award. And then we're working with South Central Planning, where we actually have a couple of adjudicated properties, right? Something that was seized or somebody didn't pay taxes on and we ended up with it. We're working with South Central Planning to give them properties so that they can build these erector set houses on it, which is basically a house built with a metal stud system. and then they're turning around and be working to give those houses to people that need them. And so they have a machine that prints like a house at a time, and just throw it up together. And I understand the cost savings are like a third of what a normal house would be. You know, they might get 10 or 20, but again, that's addressing part of that problem. So we have many different opportunities that we're working through to provide housing while we wait for Housing Human Services, the Housing Authority and HUD to really address that need of what they provided in the first place. You had a question?
House and land, we do house and land.
I don't know the details on all that, but I would think so. Right.
Some people just.
Right. And look, the Restore LA, it's probably similar to like a Restore LA project. We just know that it's properties that aren't on the tax roll. It's properties that we have to maintain. If we could give it South Central Planning and they could build a home on it and fill one house of the 800, we're all for it and helping. And look, what we're doing here, and I hear this a lot, and a lot of people come to us, and I got to give it to our team, and I talk about our team all the time. I can't say enough great things about how hard they work and everything they do. And people come to us, whether it's juvenile detention center, our housing program, our planning and zoning, coastal zoning. They want to know how we're doing it. And because they want to take what we're doing here and bring it to every other parish and have them replicate what we've been able to do successfully here. It really goes back again to our team, just being an amazing, hardworking team. Any questions on housing? Okay, we'll push through a few more slides left. Economic development. So as we talk recovery, as we talk about things that are going on, I want our residents to know we're still working on economic development, right? We have an EDA waterline grant that we actually worked with Tito on at MLK and Westside Boulevard. If you look at that area, catty corner for performance power sports, why has it been developed this whole time? It didn't have utilities. And that's what we're working on doing is a grant has been provided to us to help do the utilities. The hospital, waterworks, and the parish are all working together in that project to get that done, some development, and get some, again, more sales tax revenue and things coming in. We expanded our Whitney Bank building. We're getting things finalized and built in there as we go, creating more foot traffic downtown. Fletcher built a workforce building in Schriever, right? So they're doing things to help make sure we expand our workforce. Cynthia, Louisiana is the one I talked about last year with the lilies. They're trying to convert lilies into products, whether it be a plant container or OSB board, right? So they're still pushing forward with that project. They had a conversation about whether or not we had enough lilies. So we stuck them in a boat, took a ride, and they were like, we're good. All right, got lilies. So again, those are things that we're working to do to help foster economic development in Terrebonne Parish. And American Legion is a project that we're hopefully we'll better get quotes obtained by April 25, but taking the old American Legion building and making that a hub for our veterans, that all veteran services can work out of and work together. And at some point, hopefully make it to where maybe we get some veteran businesses created and those businesses can do work in our parish for all this recovery and resiliency that we're doing. But again, we're fighting to diversify our economy, work on taking the industries that built Terrebonne Parish, oil and gas and fisheries, and give them some injection of maybe some tech or some skilling and really start creating some other opportunities. And having unmanned aerial vehicles at the airport, I think is a huge one, along with the autonomous marine vessels that are operating now. There's a company in Houma that's doing that now, right? So I think it's all great conversations. Any questions on this? All right. Permits, I'd just like to talk about this because at one point permits used to take 2 or 3 days. They take longer than that now, but you can see what we were pre-IDA, what we got up to during IDA, and kind of where we are now, right? So we're still at a higher level. Some of the permits take maybe 2 to 3 weeks, but we are working with Chris and looking at what our software does or doesn't do, what we could do to augment or change the way we do some things to really push through making sure those permits. We're talking about Restore LA program earlier. We reached out to them and said, hey, we got a lot of Restore LA permits. Can you help us? They sent a person down just to deal with Restore LA, which allowed us to focus on our everyday permits. And so if you have problems and things aren't working, and I'll say this, any issues you guys have, we want to write them down. We want to follow up. We want to make sure. And we're always having conversations about, what does a protocol look like for how this gets done? Is there a decision tree? If we're running into issues where something gets held up, how does that director think we should fix that? And have those conversations, whether it's software, training, whatever it may be, but working with our directors to get the answers from them. They've been doing this 20 years, 10 years. They know what needs to get done. We've been empowering them to hear what they want to get done. Go ahead. Insurance reform. So the first 3 is stuff we've been doing, working not only with FEMA to really look at changing the flood maps, right? So it goes back to the conversation. The latest data FEMA has is 2018. Anything built since then is not counted. So we've been working to develop that. We divided the parish into 46 grids. Of those 46, 22 are populated. And we gave grids to FEMA that said, here's latest data with floodgates and pumps and levees and everything. And they said it's going to take 18 months to go through 3. I was like, we got 22, right? So working with Clay Higgins, we had a conversation with FEMA, and FEMA does all this through contractors. And so they said, the fact that we now know you have this many coming, we're going to have to ramp up the amount of contractors that we have to do this. I said, before you pick how many contractors you want, don't forget Lafourche, St. Charles, Plaquemine, St. Bernard, all these other parishes are going through the same thing. So not only do you need contractors to get our data processed faster, you need to make sure that we're covering this from a state perspective. And so from that, working with Tim Temple, we brought Tim down after Francine. He got to go stand on some levees and see the work that the levees did. You know, the $1 billion we put into our levee system, they estimate just for Francine, saved the federal government $1.7 billion, right? That shows right there, we taxed ourselves, we built a system, it worked. It's time for us to start getting some of that credit, right? When you look at the damage that we had or lack of damage we had for Francine, it just shows the resiliency and the hardening of structures that we did and the roofs that were changed, that better codes. Again, that's something else we should get credit for. So we're working with Tim Temple. Ryan Page back there was on his insurance transition team. And it's a conversation about saying we should get credit for the work we have done, and that should count for something today. So we're working on getting reinsurers down here. I was actually having a conversation today about having kind of like a community outreach day, and part of that day having when Tim comes down to have conversations about insurance and what's being worked on. The legislature passed 26 bills to help make it a more friendly insurance market. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to the reinsurers that everybody gets their insurance through. But we're going to bring them down here, and just like it made a difference to Tim Temple to see where the water line was on the levee and be able to touch and feel that stuff, we're going to do the same things with the reinsurers and show, hey, we did this and saved $1.7 billion for Francine alone. Then you start calculating the money we saved with Ida, and every time we have an event like that, what we've done should count, and the hardening we've done should count. And that's where we're having a conversation with reinsurers. And then we've been involved with a lawsuit with FEMA, and I'm hoping with President Trump being in office that all changes, where our Congress people, Steve Scalise and Kennedy, couldn't get information out of FEMA. We're hoping now that he's in there, and I'll share some of the conversations that we had when I was in D.C. is about how do we do this differently. So one of the first things I hoped for is that he would do an executive order and shut down risk rating 2.0. What I was told is that they lowered, say they lowered 1 million residents' rates, and 1 million residents' rates went up. Well, if they go in there and kill risk rating 2.0, those 1 million people go up, and now everybody's mad at them, right? So they said it's less likely for that to happen. But what we did talk about, and we talked about the whole process where FEMA waits on insurance and all that other stuff, all those different opportunities to change the way FEMA operates. But they're currently discussing a tax incentive related to flood insurance, right? So you getting a tax credit on your tax bill if Trump don't get rid of the federal income tax altogether, right? So there's that possibility. But a tax income credit for dealing with flood insurance. And they're also having a conversation, and what I've been talking about a couple of years now is adding other perils to insurance, right? Not just being flood insurance, because what happens is in North Carolina and California, people don't have flood insurance because they never flood, and then they flood, and then we cover them. And so when you look at the fact that, and I think really you look at the fires, what happened in North Carolina, it becomes more of that conversation of spreading the risk and having that disaster insurance. They're having those conversations right now, and that's all part of the conversation that we had, which is, it's got to change. We got to get information. We got to get, and I told them, between us, Lafourche, and St. Charles, we're probably going to spend $4 to $5 million to give FEMA data that they should be doing on their own. And that's money I can't put into roads and bridges and grass. That's got to change. And that's the conversations that we're having about what needs to be done with FEMA. And look, Trump's even said, talking about blowing FEMA up and giving the money straight to the states. Anything along those lines, even if he doesn't do that, make sure they get in line to get their stuff straight. The two most bureaucratic departments or groups I've ever dealt with is LADOTD and FEMA, right? And when I look at government and bureaucracy, and that's what you look at what Trump's doing now with Elon Musk, government isn't the problem. Bureaucracy is the problem. And that's where what I've been working on since I got in office is to eliminate the bureaucracy and implement some efficiencies. And the more you do that, the more efficient you could do things, the more money you can save, the more you could take the money you have and do other things with. You're going to start to see that transition both at the federal level and with Jeff Landry doing the same thing. He's doing some of the same stuff we're doing. He has a saying that I love because I feel like I'm aggressive like him. And he says, when you're playing from behind, you got to play twice as hard, which is why I push for us to be aggressive in everything we're doing and trying to have different conversations with FEMA, with the Corps of Engineers, with all these different groups, with our Congress people that says, working with them. When our first meeting with DOTD, I said, look, I'm sure y'all get your butts chewed every day. Let's have a conversation about how we can work together and how I can help you. If you can't get to something, what can I do to get to it for you? Because in most cases, I'm going to do it faster and cheaper. And us being the guinea pig as a parish, and again, working to be our own DOTD district, which is still fighting for that because we're a sub-district of New Orleans. But in all those situations going, let us do it and show you how we can do it and take that example and use it around the rest of the state. And that's what the conversations we have. So any questions on insurance and risk rating 2.0 and FEMA? And we all know it sucks, we agree, but. Okay.
Since I lost 2 fire stations to insurance, we tried to replace it. We started in 2020, we had 2 insurance from black people. And we received enough funding to build the fire stations up to the canal, to the insurance, we didn't have to speed. So we've been trying to do everything according to FEMA's guidelines, and the state guidelines, and the parish guidelines. We're just getting ready to put pollen in the ground, and we have pollen laden with them, so we can't drop it because we can't get a permit. Because our plans of the station, which is we've got metal building sitting on the ground, elevated to spot or whatever, meeting all the other requirements that we need to meet both street items, but not meeting the requirements now because in 2023 some laws passed that we need to have an enclosed room elevated at 2 feet above,
Base flood elevation.
yes. So we can't get a permit now. So now we got to redesign this whole process. We got to build a room that we don't need, that we never been, which is more money for us to spend. Where do we go?
So I think that's a great story to tell, right? And Chris and I have been talking, I think this last week we've actually had this conversation. But a good example was Cyrus Auto Repair. I think I'm saying that right. They wanted them to raise that garage. And early on I had a conversation with Chris and I said, have we asked a question about if you keep doing this and people have to drive 20 to 30 minutes up the bayou to get work done, that you then price them out of their own local services and businesses, right? And through asking questions like that, we were able to get some variances and different things, right? And look, at the end of the day, FEMA is going to come in and do a survey, and anything that was 50% damaged, they're going to tag, and they compared maps for years, right? And they're going to come back to us and say, you have to fix this. So it does put our planning zoning group in a tough spot because if we allow it, we get in trouble, and if we get in trouble, we get pulled out of the NFIP program altogether. And so that's why we have to work both sides of this, right? 100%. And the insurance is going to be high on it when you do. But we're going to sync up after because I want to tell that story where I got a fire department that can't get something done because of the bureaucracy and red tape we're dealing with FEMA. I want to take that story, publicize it, and make sure that people know that this is why we're trying to change what we need to change. And Mike hearing it here today, maybe he didn't know about it. Jessica hears about it, right? We're all telling this story, right? Because the people in Washington need to hear the story. Because the people in the state of Louisiana know. We know how bad it is. And our delegation in Washington knows.
No living area.
It's the same building.
Right.
Just put it in closed
So-
area.
There's no living area, no
I got-
posted, no finishing, it's a garage.
I got called into a meeting regarding St. Elwha Church in Dularge. And based on what they were doing and an estimate they got, they were having to do this level. So I got Chris, and we've talked about it a little bit. We need to talk about it more. We can talk about it at the end of this. But we went through and was able to help them identify some things where one thing they quoted 60,000 was only 10. And by doing that, get into a price range that made it had more options. And Chris and I hadn't had a chance to talk about if that's happened yet, but that's a conversation we'll have to start. And then at the same time, bringing it up chain and talking to Connor's people that we do deal with and say, you want an example of what's wrong? This is what's wrong. And push on it from there. And at the end of the day, we need to have fire protection. We need to make sure, and when you look at some of the stuff that the Biden administration passed, having a base flood elevation of 2, having to use union labor over a job that's over a certain amount of money, those are the things that either people aren't maybe aware of or hadn't had a chance to get to yet. But the louder noise we make, the more opportunity we have that while you're in there looking at these things with FEMA that we already know you're working on, what about, let's make sure, can I get this one knocked off? Or maybe not all the risk rating 2.0 is killed, but maybe a couple things in it can be.
It affects every insurer, because we can get rated, our insurance rating can go up, because we're not frustrated yet, and these people should, our insurance can go up, and they can be hollering at us. Anyway,
Approximately every so many miles.
Right. Yep. No, we understand that. We experienced some of that with you guys.
The problem is, they said they want to come back and do the stations of service, and we can't start the building. Everything ties up, so every month that you wait.
Well, let's circle after this meeting. Again, I know Chris talked about it a little bit. We're going to make sure we do anything and everything we can to help. And again, share that story and message, because I feel like that's where the rubber really meets the road. Like, I got a fire station that can't get built right now because of these regulations with FEMA. You know, can we get it to Scalise or Mike Johnson and have them get it to Trump that says, hey, this needs to be fixed right now. You know, Trump just went through and was trying to identify and make sure money wasn't being wasted with federal grants. And through that conversation, he put things on a pause. Well, I got 5 text messages going. I need a list of every project you have, what could be held up, how much money it is. Sent those text messages off. The next day, he lifts that. Right? So he's definitely listening to the people that we have fighting for us and having those conversations. And we were able to make a change in a day based on the effect it would have on us, especially with post-Ida, post-Francine recovery. So we're going to keep fighting that fight and having those conversations, 100%. Yes. Okay. Any other questions on insurance before we move forward? And thank you for sharing that, by the way. Going on to accountability. So it's some stuff that we did last year, but I think it's important to talk about it because I know we deal with blight throughout the parish. So we have over 500 properties in the current process. We had $1 million. I think we're down to $250,000 left. I think we're shortly about to announce that we found some more funding that you can use to get rid of blight. But we're looking off the original $1 million. And we also changed our nuisance abatement ordinance. The whole property owner is more accountable. That happened near the third quarter of the year. We had a panhandling and vagrants ordinance that was unconstitutional. We've implemented a camping ordinance, recreation accountability, a master plan with no more teeth. The council passed that action, and that's going to be something that's going to be formed. It's like a rec advisory board like they had before, but now they have teeth. And they're going to create a master plan, and they're going to do some things to work together. And I'm hoping to get this one here passed shortly, which is food trucks downtown. Because there's a study that shows for every dollar you invest in making your town more walkable with stuff like food trucks, you get a 10-fold return on investment. And again, at the end of the day, that's more sales tax, more tax revenue. Yes, sir. I think Kim needs to send them 2 or 3 more videos every week to DOTD about the tunnel. I don't think he's sending quite enough videos right now. No, we're working on that. We got some other conversations. Right. Second largest Mardi Gras in the state, most family friendly. That's what I tell everybody.
Safest one.
Right. So we are working again with DOTD. They closed the tunnel. It might have been about 2 months ago because they're saying they have a rehab project that's going to be coming. So again, we're just pushing on them. They got other projects I would love to announce, but I don't want to announce them until they make them public. But I think you heard Noah talk about the difference of projects between last year and this year. We definitely have DOT's attention. When I walk up to somebody with DOTD, they go, "We know you want to be your own district," before I can say anything. So that's where we start. I said, but at the same time, I declared an emergency for St. Charles and Tunnel when it looks like the 10 Commandments were coming out the road. And we showed up to work, and they came out, and they said, we'll have it fixed by Saturday. But that asphalt patch cost $76,000. I could have done concrete for that, right? Those are examples that we're given, these conversations that we're having, saying, here's a real example with real numbers, with real data of how if we could do this thing differently or better, the difference and impact we can make on it. And again, pushing real hard. I had a conversation with the governor, and he asked this question I had to answer because I want to know how much would it cost if we cut all the state grass in the parish? $1.6 million. And so I was having a conversation with him about, what can we do to work together? He goes, you give me a number to how much it would cost for you to cut it, I'll find the money, and without missing a beat. I was like, $1.6 million. Boy, he looks at me. I was like, I'm ready. Let's go. But it's working through that and the things he's doing with DOTD to restructure that. And I definitely think it's going to be better. It might take a year or two, but while we're going through that, we're giving examples of things that we could do differently or better to make an impact. And again, make roads safe for our residents. If a road's unsafe, we're going to go patch it, whether I get my hand slapped or not, because like I tell them, I'd rather a lawsuit over, if something would happen and somebody would die, I'd rather the lawsuit that I patched it versus the lawsuit that I didn't, because I saved a life. So, all right, any questions on this before I move forward? Yes, ma'am.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the nuisance and abatement? I
So-
have a property that got noticed. My mother has a property that got noticed. She's not living here anymore, and I didn't know about it until somebody took her name in the paper.
Okay.
So, if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, and then I have a question.
Okay, so the way we do it is most of the time a resident's going to call, somebody's going to see something, they report it to us. We go through a process to try to identify the landowner, property owner, and let them know this has been reported. And sometimes it might be tall grass. Sometimes it could be the building needs to be demolished, whatever range of that is, and we have a hearing. So we normally don't have a hearing, and Chris, correct me on this, but until we've made sure we've made contact and somebody knows. Now, through that process, we'd had to send an email or a letter, We have to wait for that to come back and everything. One of the things we changed is now we can actually serve people with their last known addresses. And the reason why we're doing that is we want somebody to know this property is an issue and we got to get it resolved and work with the owner, because half the time property owners demolish it themselves or get it repaired, or somebody might not get the notification. So we did that, and we also asked some stacking. So if I have one property owner who has multiple properties with issues, those now stack. Or if I got one property with the same issue over and over again, it now stacks. And that's just us trying to hold accountable. So with that process, a letter gets sent. We have a hearing with the council. The council looks at what are the circumstances. The person can come talk about what they're dealing with. And sometimes they continue it, but it's up to the council to figure out what the next step is, with the ultimate goal of making sure that property is safe and not blighted. Does that answer that first question? Okay.
So that is, my mother has a property here in Chauvin. It's going to be mine. When she goes to the door, it's going to be mine. While I'm here to see a little bit more what's going on. I live in Justin Parish. So this is my home. I grew up here. So I found that for it would be best to have that property demolished. She's not living there anymore. It was her mother's and father's property. She's 93. So the house has been problems that we're having, I say we, and speaking for her, the problems that we're having in the parish, I expect my parish officials and the people to be able to be up on that game, to be able to help. I don't expect you to know everything.
So I can tell you,
Everything, but for the problems that we have, if there's government funding, if there's funding for that, I expect them to know about that. And there's two possibilities that no one knows about. And you go higher and they kick it back. And you ask someone local, they don't know. They say call here, call that, and everybody goes to FEMA. I'm so tired of dealing with FEMA.
amen to that. It's the greatest thing I heard tonight. So I can tell you that the $1 million that we originally started working with and us trying to find other funding is because there's a lot of times, a lot of strings, a lot of hoops to jump through to get funding in some of those situations. So we're trying to do it ourselves. And so we still have some funding available. We can get with Chris Pulaski, get that address. We can let you know where it is in the process. And what we're able to do is when, hopefully it goes through the process until we run the funding in that source and we're going to find another source. But our goal is to try to help our residents tear their properties down with whether other programs work or don't work, or you got to have flood insurance. I mean, there's so many different rules on a lot of that stuff. We're able to say, we're going to condemn it and we're going to demolish it and we're going to pay for it and it's done. So we could consult with Chris. You could do it now or after and get the address and he could tell you everything that's going on, what the future looks like for that property and doing what we can. Because again, the goal at the end of the day for us is to clean the blight up and make sure that we can turn these properties over into opportunities that generate tax revenue by being back on the market, and somebody else may be building a home. So we can do it now. He can get it from you or after, whatever's easiest for you. But we're here to help, and that's what we're doing.
I have a question with the nuisance department too. I mean, when you get to a point where the nuisance and get all they can do, then they turn it over to criminal court. Right?
It does. I'm familiar with that process, and we're actually looking at changing that process because not a whole lot happens there. So again, we're looking at redoing our nuisance and abatement department to where that's maybe not even something that happens. It depends on the property. And that's where if you have an address, we can look at that specific address and that specific case because we do this on a case-by-case basis. We definitely try to work with everybody because we don't want to spend the money to tenant properties. We'd love the residents to deal with it and manage it, but in some situations where they can't, we want to offer that hand up and help them through that process. So if you have a specific property, let's look at the address and we can look at where it's at versus where it's going versus where it could be. Because what happens if, say we tear it down, not on this program, but our normal program, then we're going to put it on the bill of the resident to get that paid. If they don't pay it, we seize the property. It goes up for sheriff's sale and then somebody could get it. But then the state law was at one point that they could come back 3 years and pay the taxes. That we're trying to get that reduced to maybe even a year, where after that year, the person's free and clear. So there's so many different steps, so many different parts of the process that stops people from taking these properties, redoing them and putting them back into service. And so that's what things we're working on both at a local level we can do, like I said, with this program, where we're demolishing it and we're not going after the resident for the funding because we have a funding opportunity, but we will work on that on a case-by-case basis. So let's get that property address and we can check that out with you. All right. Anybody else had a question? All right, going on the next slide. Quality of life. So we talked last time we were here about rebranding quality of life, right? Every time you talk about recreation, people think about kids. And you look at, I want quality of life no matter where you live, no matter how old you are. So one of the projects that we did, and the first two are duplicate, but we took over these parks right here, and we're going through the process along with some other parks, because I don't think what's the one behind Auditorium, Noah? Shady Oaks. We actually took over Shady Oaks and we're working with both Terrebonne General and CIS to build a different kind of park there. But one of the first things we've been doing is taking down all the unsafe items and making it a safe space. We actually did that with some parish workers on a day that they wanted to get back to the community. But we took over all these parks, and for example, the Air Base Softball Complex, the goal is to make that the Bayou Country Sportsplex of the east side. If anybody ever heard of the Bogachita Park, they have a cool bike trail. That's something we're looking at adding in there and actually working with Jesco on some capital outlay funding to help bring that park to what you see with Bayou Country Sports Park, right? So making sure that the residents on the east side get the same services and opportunity the residents on the west side get. And that's what we're doing in all these parks and making sure they're maintained, make sure they're safe, make sure that we have activities for adults, kids, whatever it is, seniors, whoever it is, to use these parks to their best effort. And that's something I'm real proud of and we're doing a great job with. Any questions on this? Nope. All right, moving on. Bayous, so a lot of this we did talk about before. We're working to make sure that our waterways are clean, maintained, utilized. You know, some cities would die for a waterway to go through their downtown area. We have it, and it's not being utilized. So we've been working through, we started a project from Lafayette Street to, was that West Side Boulevard, I think we did. We did what's called a clear and snag. So we've had $8 million since 2012 to dredge Bayou Terrebonne to -6. Well, the problem with doing Bayou Terrebonne to -6 is you're going to have bake destabilization, you're going to have some issues. So we said, is there another way for us to scope this to do a clear and snag? Thank you for coming. A clear and snag and do get more bang for our buck. And so by us doing this test project, we learned what we could do per mile. And now we're taking that funding we've had since 2012, and we're going to go all the way to the parish line and do a clear and snag. And then we're going to take that same thing we're doing and start replicating that in other bayous. That's where some of the Activate the Bayou projects come through with CDBGDR. We found that we have 900 derelict vessels in all of our waterways. That's canals, lakes, you name it, right? We have $1 million with IDA insurance that we're looking to start and get as many as we can. And similar to the nuisance and abatement stuff, trying to find other funding. We're applying for some other grants to go through. At the same time, we changed some things with nuisance and abatement to hold the vessel owners accountable also, right? So we're doing things from both perspectives, but we're working to get the stuff out of the bayous. We're looking at doing that through 3 or 4 different funding sources and working there. And then we launched a Bayou Revival campaign. One of the things we did for Mardi Gras last year was we put some orange fencing all along Bayou Terrebonne by the mall. And then we put some berms at bridges that if trash does make it into Bayou Terrebonne, it doesn't make it into the intercoastal. And so we're doing some things there. We're increasing our litter signage, and we're starting to do cleanups and clearing snags of all our major bayous and making people aware. We need your help to help us make sure the bayous are clean. You know, our solid waste person will go through and do a cleaning of an area, not even a bayou, just a regular area, and within the next week it's back like it was. So we got to make sure that we work as a community that we're littering less. But I'm also working with the DA and working on getting our community service project back. As far as I'm concerned, if you litter, you should pick it up. And working with them to make sure between that and working with the sheriff's office to get litter picked up and maintained on a regular basis. All right, I think we're real close here. Roads and bridges talked about. We'll go to the next one. That's it. That's my presentation. That's what we've been doing for the past year. This is what we have coming up in the next year. And if anybody has any questions, I'll stay here as long as every question gets answered, and whatever questions we can't answer, we'll get you the information and get it back to you. Yes, sir. Hopefully cooking them for the boucherie. Right, Noah? Noah, we got a pig problem. We're going to coordinate with the levy district, make sure they know that's going on. We can't go kill us a pig? I'm about to say, we got a boucherie coming up, March 22nd, I think it is. Okay. We're going to take that info, pass it on to the levy district, make sure they know, and then see if there's any way we can work together to resolve that. Yeah, maybe we could have like a pig shooting fundraiser or something like that, right? So it's if y'all can make sure we got that. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you coming into the audience as a citizen now?
Turning by this alley road where the shell or cut into it right now, where we're losing all the shells, so we did that. I said that to Jacob early on, probably about a month or 2 ago. And also, through demand from like people without a GED, I worked with Fletcher, and they're gonna do the work ready. They're doing an interest meeting at the library, February 15th, which is handing down to 2 p.m. So it's at the South Regional Library. They will do GEDs, but they will also do like, look at the other programs, could be like, get you ready for work training or trade. So, that's gonna happen on February 15th, so if you can get that out, you know, I actually shared it on the Facebook page, and if you have Facebook, share it to other people, because we have quite a few people.
Yep. That library is amazing too. If you hadn't been to that yet, you got to go check it out. They do some cool things there, and look, we're looking at the STEM, esports stuff, bringing those programs down to the library, and the same thing, outreach, whatever we're doing around the parish, anywhere else, we need to make sure we're also doing here. All right, any other questions? Anything else? I know I talked to a few people before. Anything I hadn't covered you want to cover? Anything's an opportunity? What's that? You can update, yes, sir.
Okay, you talked about the fire station around the canal. Go through the process of getting fire station up a little cut. Fire station up a little Caillou is still waiting on FEMA to approve the design, but it will be rebuilt. Recreation District, we are waiting on FEMA on our design of the gym and the swimming pool, which we will be putting at Klondike Park. And our tennis court that was torn up at the park down here by the old swimming pool, we're in the design phase of that to replace it. So that's the update of what's going on in Chauvin.
Also, you get the bathrooms come to the
Oh,
client.
yes, we are waiting on bids for bathrooms at the Klondike Park.
When I give Kim the mic, she won't ever let it go. No, I was joking. Go ahead.
Our schools, Upper Little Kai and Grand Kai Elementary is going to be groundbreaking in another year and a half. Right now, they fighting for the restrooms. FEMA don't want to build the restrooms upstairs. They want to, or something like that. I don't know, but it's rolling. Our kids are going to be in school in another 2 years.
Awesome.
Amen.
Yes.
And I like to say our parish and our school board were more together. Any kind of way, however, because every time I talk to them, they tell me, oh, we don't mix with them.
We're working together. We meet with Bubba. I meet Bubba on a regular basis. We're actually working with them on school safety. Millage was rededicated year before last. That funding's starting to get realized with some SRO officers in the schools, along with safety projects with gates and different things. And so that's one of the ways. And one of the projects we hadn't been awarded yet for CDBGDR is actually working with them on a magnet school in the old Fletcher building. And when I say magnet school, everybody thinks all these fancy things: carpentry, electrician, all the skills, tech, nursing, all that dual enrollment type stuff. That's how the parish is working with the school district and Fletcher to bring all those things together, provide better opportunities for our children. So,
Is that, they had it on one of the slides earlier, the aviation program at Fletcher, is that for aviation mechanics?
yes. Yep. And so it's going to be an actual hangar and everything, aviation mechanic, drone stuff. I mean, all that kind of stuff is going to be some skilling opportunities. And so I'm excited about that. Yes, ma'am.
Has the Corps of Engineer and the Coast Guard gotten together to see about body Terrebonne out there, being dredged to make it navigable for the boats? Because right now you can probably walk across it with all the silt they got in it.
Yep.
And, I know we're cleaning up the body in town and that's all great, but from the Crest Hill going down, that body needs to be cleaned.
Yeah, so we have that project because we had the funding for Bayou Terrebonne, but we're able to take that and use that as a test, right? And say, this is what we want to do instead of maybe dredging to a -6. We might do a 4, might do a 2, depending on the area, and take that same project, and we have some CDBG money that's going to work with a couple more of the bayous, and then we're just going to continue to push for more funding. So we've met with the Coast Guard, the Corps of Engineers, anybody that would listen about vessels and everything else. And, there's definitely ways we're trying to work together, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to clean it. And we will. We're going to get it done, and we're going to make sure that all our waterways are healthy and maintain on a regular basis moving forward, where you don't have the silting in as much as you do right now. Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Yeah, sure. Go on once. No, look, thank y'all for coming out. I say all the time it's going to take all of us. But I want to thank you for taking I feel like time's our most valuable resource, and the fact that you gave us some of your time tonight to hear what's going on in the parish, we really appreciate it. For those that had questions, let's make sure we sync up with our team members in the back. And I thank you guys for making the time to hear about what's going on in Terrebonne Parish. And our saying is, you see something, you say something. And that's what we want to know. If you got issues, make sure we have the address, make sure we have a phone number, make sure we can take that information from here, and that you know where to call. The 868-5050, you call that phone number, you'll get to the department that can assist you. And we always tell people, give us the name, give us the address, give us a picture, we're going to get that issue worked on by these great team members that we have back here. And I really can't thank them enough, and I thank you guys also. Yes, sir.
Jason, I just want to tell you thank you, and you for your team members and all the people that represent us, and throughout.
Yeah, thank you for our representatives for being here, Senator for being here. They took their time also. And again, conversations they might have heard tonight is a story that they can share and help us fight that fight in the battle together. So thank you all. Thank you for helping us move Terrebonne forward.